Okay, here we go. Here's our first question. What are we learning today?
Chess.
You try answer it on the poll. Perfect. I think that's all of us who has answered. And yes, indeed, we'll be learning chess today. So what can I say about chess? Chess is a very fun game to play. A lot of strategy involved.
I already joined chess.com is before the class even started.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I'll first start by first showing you how a chessboard looks like. So I'll share my screen. Okay. Can all of you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, let's show you first how a chessboard looks like. Let me just put this over here, come here.
Wow, that's a lot of screens of chess.
So this is pretty much how the a chessboard is. We have 8 squares, 8 rows, and 8 columns. And we have 2 sides over here. One is the white side over here, and one is the black side. So it's a 2-player game. And pretty much the goal of the game is to checkmate the enemy king. We'll learn what checkmate is as we proceed on, but I'll let you know. I just wanted to tell you that the goal of the game is to checkmate. Sorry, somebody had a question?
E4. Pawn E4.
Oh no, I just wanted to show what a chessboard is.
Yeah.
Okay, I think what I'll show first is the chess squares. I think the first thing you guys should be familiar with is what are the chess squares on the board. So let's show you that. Okay. So first, any columns like this, these are all columns. So we write them in terms of letters. So if I'm talking about this column, this will be the A column because you see this is over here, that shows which column it is. So we call this the A column, or if you want to use chess terms, each column is called a file. So this is the A file, and then the one after that, it's called the B file. Then after that is the C file, then the D file, the E file, F file, G file, and the H file. Okay, does that make sense?
E is short.
And for any rows, so this way, we call them ranks. In chess, we call any rows ranks. So when we are talking about ranks, we write it in terms of numbers. So over here, this will be our first rank. The one next to that will be our second rank. And after that is our third rank, our fourth rank, fifth rank, all the way until we reach our 8th rank. That's how we do it. So we have columns or ranks in files, and we have ranks. So let's show you a little bit on how we will identify squares. Let's say, okay. Let's say we want to get to this square. How would we know what square this is? So this is how we do it. We first see which file it is on. So I start from left to right. I see this is A, B, C, D, E. Okay. So this is on the E file. And then I go upwards. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So, sorry, 1 second. So this square is on the E file and the 4th rank. Therefore, this square is E4. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to try one exercise with you guys. Go to the chat, and I want you guys to, I'm going to highlight a square over here. I want you guys to write in chat what square this is, okay? Let's choose this square. Okay, what square is this? I see one person type G6. Be careful. So first we write the letter first. So we would write G first and then the row. So it will be G6. Yes, I see most of you guys have it down. Yeah, exactly. So the square that I highlighted right here is the G6 square. Perfect. Guys are getting the hang of this. Okay, so now that we have covered the squares, we'll be keep on introducing the squares as we go along this lesson. So first thing I'm going to show you guys is actually before I show you anything, let me show you guys how to set up the board. Okay. In chess.com, it's already set up for us, but let's say, oh, 1 second. Let's show you how to set up the board. Oh, okay. Here, let me do something else actually. Give me 1 minute, please. Okay, I'm gonna draw once again. Okay, perfect. So over here in the website that I have, it's already set up. But let's say that you're playing on the board with someone else. How would you set this up? So first of all, we have the rooks. Okay. So this piece over here is called a rook. And for black and for white, we have 2 of them. Where do these go on the board? So the rooks, they will always go in the corner. For black and for white, they will always go in the corner. So it'll go on the squares A1 and H1. And for black, it'll go on the squares A8 and H8, right? Does that make sense? After the rooks, we have these horse-like pieces. They are referred to here as the knights. So the knights over here will go right next to the rooks. So if the rook is on A1, one of the knights will go on B1. And if the rook is on H1, the knight will go on G1. And same for the black side. It'll go on B8 and the other will go on G8. Okay. Now after the knights, so we have the rooks, we have the knights. Oh, sorry, this should not happen. Okay, after that, we have something called these things. These are called the bishops. Okay. We'll talk about how these pieces move later. I just wanted you to know where would we put these pieces. So the bishops will go right next to the knights. So the knight goes next to the rook. The bishop will go next to the knight. So the knight is on B1 and G1. The bishop will go on C1 and F1. And similarly for the black side, it'll go on C8 and F8. Okay. Now, after the bishop, we'll talk about the queen. The queen looks like, how do we show it? Like this. It has 4 or 5 pointed hats. This is the queen. So where would the queen go? This I think is very important to remember. Remember that the queen will always go on her color. What do I mean? Let's see at white side, for example. We notice that there's a white square here and there's a dark square here. Okay. If we're talking about the queen for white side, it'll always go on the white square. So we notice that this is a light square, this is a dark square. we will put it on the light square, because for white, we will put it on the light side. Now for black, following the same logic, we put it on either the dark square or the light square. For black, we will put it on the dark square. So over here. Does that make sense? It'll go, the queen will always belong on this, on which color she is. So if it's a white queen, whatever square is remaining, she will go on the light square. And for black side, it'll go on the dark square. Now we have one spot remaining. This is where we put our king. So our king looks like this. Has like a plus, like a cross sign on top of it. This will go on the remaining square, on the first or the 8th rank. That is where we put it. And then finally, we have these pieces over here. These we call pawns. And we have 8 pawns in this game. And we will put them all directly in front of all our pieces. So if I show for white side, there'll be a pawn here, pawn here, pawn here, pawn here, and we'll keep putting 8 pawns until we get like this. We have all pawns in front of the pieces. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so that is how you set the pieces up. So we'll recap one more time. The rooks first, these pieces over here, the rooks, they will always go in the corner. The knights will go right next to the rooks. Then we have the bishops. The bishops will go right next to the knight. Then we have our queen. The queen, it'll always be on the color that she is. So if it's a white queen, she will go on the light square. And if it's a black queen, she will go on the dark square. And then the king is whatever square is remaining. And then we have 8 pawns. It'll go all in front of the remaining pieces. Like so. Okay. All right. So now that we have learned how the pieces move, sorry, not how the pieces. We have learned how to set up the board. Let's show you now how the pieces move. We're going to start with a rook. For that, first I'll need to actually stop sharing my screen for a second. Okay, now we share. Okay. Everybody can see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk. We were talking about the rook. Okay. So the rooks, as we have discussed, they are on the corners. Let me just get rid of the pieces here. Okay. The rook. Now, how does the rook move? I'll show you guys. So the rook can move either in a straight line. So it can go straight ahead. It can move to any one of these squares. It can move straight ahead. It can go back also. Like so, any of these squares. It can also move sideways as well. Any number of squares sideways. So all these squares are accessible. And all these squares are accessible. So the rook moves in a straight line and also moves sideways. Any number of squares. Now, let me show the next diagram over here. Now, if we have a piece in front of it, the rook can capture it. So how does capturing look like in this game? So we remember how the rook moves. It moves any number of squares. So now if there's an opposing piece in front of it, it can capture. So how does this look? Now, if we move our rook first over to the place where the piece is, and then we remove that piece away. This is how it looks. So once again, we have our rook here and we have a pawn there. We move our rook over to the pawn and take the pawn off. That is how we capture over here. One thing to note in the next diagram I'll show is that the rook cannot jump over pieces. So let's say that I wanted to capture this pawn on e7. I can't do that because I have my own pawn on e6. So I cannot jump over my own pieces. That's one thing to note. So I cannot capture this pawn on e7. Another thing to note is that because of these two pawns, I cannot move to e8. Let's say I wanted to move to e8. I cannot do that because the rook cannot jump over pieces. Okay. What's the next step? Okay. All right. Here's the next exercise I want you guys to do in the chat. Okay. So over here in this diagram, the rook can only capture one of these pawns. Write in the chat, what is this square? What square is the pawn on where this rook can capture? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a lot of A3s in the chat, and that is indeed the correct answer. The rook can capture the pawn on A3 because the rook moves in a straight line. If you notice all the squares, there's a pawn on A3. So once again, how do we capture it? We bring our rook over to A3, put our rook there, and remove the piece. That's how you capture. Okay. That's how the rook moves. Let me see how good we are on time. Okay. Next, we're going to cover. So now we have covered how the rook moves. Let's go over to how the bishops move. So remember, the bishop is right next to the knight. So we put the rooks in the corner. Then after the rooks, we have the knight. Then right next to the knight, we have the bishops. So how do the bishops move? Let's see that. Actually, let me just take care of this. So, yeah. So we remember that we have two bishops. And if I show the diagram, actually, we have two bishops on different squares. We have one bishop on a dark square and one bishop on a light square. And same for white, one bishop on a light square, one bishop on a dark square. Okay, so why am I saying this? What's happening here? 1 second, I'm having a bit of an issue here. Let's go here. I'm having trouble. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Should be good now. Okay. What if I press this? Sorry, just give me 1 more minute. Okay. Okay. Now, how do the bishops move? The bishops, they move in a diagonal. So let's see this bishop, for example. So it can go any of these squares, any of these squares. So it all goes in a diagonal. It can go backwards as well. These squares can also go like this. Now, capturing for bishop works the same like how you would capture with a rook. So let's say that we have a bishop here on e4 and we have a pawn here on g6. So because the bishop moves in a diagonal, it can capture this pawn on g6. So what we would do once again is take the bishop, put it on top of the pawn, and then remove the pawn. That's how you would capture with a bishop. Okay. And once again, the bishop moves diagonally. Let me see, how can I do this? Okay, all right. So even from here, for example, so last time we had our bishop on e4. Even from b1, for example, it can still capture the same pawn from b6. So the same process applies. Take the bishop, put it over on g6 and remove the pawn. So bishops are a very useful long-range piece. And once again, similar like rooks, the bishop cannot jump over pieces. So same diagram. This time the bishop cannot capture this pawn on g6 because there's a pawn on, sorry, that's not what's supposed to happen. Put this back here, put it back here, like so. So the pawn over here on g6 cannot be taken because there's a pawn on e4. So the bishop cannot jump over to capture this pawn on g6. Okay. And will you be using the chat one more time? Here's the diagram. What square can the bishop capture? So what is the name of the square where the pawn can be taken? There's only one pawn that can be taken. Just name the square in chat. Anyone else? I see G2 in the chat. Yeah, and indeed, that's right. So the pawn on G2 here can be taken. Once again, move the bishop on top of the pawn and remove the pawn away. So yeah, the pawn on G2 can be taken. All right, that wraps it up for the bishop. Okay, we have time for going over the queen. So just 1 second. Let me just stop sharing here. Okay, actually. Okay, perfect. So we'll be going over once again. We have covered the rook. We have covered the bishop. We're going to cover how the queen moves. The queen, once again, this is the piece that's right next to the king. So first we started with the rooks. Right next to the rooks, we put the knights. Then right next to the knight, we put the bishop. And then there were 2 squares remaining. We had to choose where the queen and king went. So the queen goes on our own color. So that's why we put the queen over here on the light square. And for the black side, we put it on the dark square. So the queen is the most powerful piece in chess. So make sure that when you're playing, do not lose your queen, because it's just that powerful. Now, why is it so powerful? If you remember how a rook and a bishop moves, the queen can pretty much move either like a rook or like a bishop. If I put a piece here, let us actually see, maybe the next time. Okay, perfect. So if I put a queen here, these are all the squares that can move like a rook or like a bishop. So as you can see, the queen can cover a lot of squares just because it moves both like a queen, moves like a rook or like a bishop. So the same processes go once again for how the queen moves. If the queen wants to capture something, you would put your queen to where you want to capture and remove the piece away. So that's how you capture. So once again, instant replay. There's a pawn over here on g6. There's a queen on e4. You take the queen from e4, remove the pawn on g6, and put your queen on g6. Okay. Once again, just like the rook and the bishop, the queen cannot jump over pieces. So we have a queen on g2. If it weren't for the pawn on g4, or the white pawn on g4, it would have been able to take the pawn on g6. But because the queen cannot jump over pieces, this pawn on g6 cannot be taken. Okay. And then finally, we'll go with one last exercise. So remember, the queen moves either like a rook or like a bishop. So this is a diagram which has quite a lot of pawns. So out of all of these pawns, there's only one pawn here that can be taken with the queen. So what is the coordinates of the square? Yeah, just type that in chat. Here, I'm getting a bit of a varied response here. Okay, so yes, it is right that the pawn on b7 can be. I'm seeing some h2s. So remember, the pawn on h2 cannot be taken because let's go over again how the queen moves. So it can move this, like this, and like this. And I do not see the pawn on h2 that can be taken over here. So the pawn on h2 cannot be taken by the queen. I see also a3 once again. If I again move this like a rook, the pawn, there's no pawn. The pawn on a3 cannot be taken. So if you guys said b7, that is the correct answer. So if I move the queen like so, I see that the pawn on b7 can be taken. So yeah. So once again, let's review once again how the pieces move. Let's start with the rook. The rook can move in a straight line. So either it can move in a straight line or sideways. Okay. So that's how the rook moves. And for the bishop, it moves diagonally. Moves diagonally, like this, like this. Okay. And finally, the queen. The queen can move either like a rook. So if you remember, the rook moves straight or sideways, or like a bishop, diagonally. So it can move these many number of squares. Okay. And I think that is all. Does anybody have any questions? No one? Someone asking, where is the knight? Let me share my screen once again, just to show you. I assume you mean by where the knight is on the chessboard when we're setting it up. So I'll review with that. So the rooks go in the corner and the knight is right next to where the rooks would. So for the white side, that will be b1 and g1. And for the black side, that would be b8 and g8. Does that answer your question? Anyone else? No one else? Okay. Well, I think that's going to be it for this lesson. I hope you guys learned a lot today, and hopefully you guys, I recommend playing some games so that you can get a feel for how the pieces move. And yeah, that will be all for me today.
When are we gonna play a chess match?
We're gonna play. Is there supposed to be like a chess match going after this class? Is that what's happening?
When are we gonna play a chess match?
I'm not exactly sure. I haven't been told when you guys are going to be playing a chess match. But for now, I think you can either play chess on either chess.com or leechess.org. So I'll type those links in chat if you guys want to get started playing some chess. So these are the links that you can use to you can play some chess on. So, and either one of those are good. Okay, and yeah, that is all for me. So
What are you?
yeah, go ahead.